It's been a minute and I've been doing some really big things, but first let's talk about this light and some film. The once secretive Kodak Aerocolor 125 film has started making some public appearances as SantaRae 100 and as Luminare 100 from Popho, although there's some other ones, but the nice folks at Popho sent me a roll of this to shoot and I thought I would do it. But first, since it's been really dreary, I thought I would show you what SantaRae looked like in the blazing sunlight because I just don't have much of that right now. But as you'll see, things look fairly nice and neutral. Maybe a slight tendency toward warmer color, maybe more favoring the greens, which makes sense since this is an actual aerial film. It does have a clear base, but since I'm not using lab scanning equipment, that was not a particularly large factor in anything other than you do get light piping, which means you should be careful when loading it in really bright sunlight because light will actually travel up the film and fog the edges a bit. Speaking of the film, this Kodak Aerocolor film is actually ideally shot at 100 ISO for photographic reasons. Pause this for a more full explanation, but TLDR is that aerial photography is different than normal people photography. In addition to the Popho film, the people at Viltrox Weeylite sent me this nifty K21 light. Check out the website, which I'm showing you here, to learn all the nitty-gritty details about it, but I want to just show it in action by combining the two things. So I'll be sharing this studio style shoot I did with Madeline and Alyssa, and the Weeylite K21 with Popho film, aka Aerocolor, aka SantaRae, aka Electra, and so on. I thought it was interesting that the new Apurture or Amaran, or however you say it, lights with the little magnetic ends just came out, because this K21 actually has magnets in it that are quite good, and as you can see, they stick to the light stand. Unfortunately, it wasn't really the best spot for these photos, but it was worth trying and it was totally fun. And I had two, by the way, and there's a super handy app that allows you to actually sample color from different photos. It's not my photo, by the way. I just like the color and used it to sample. So you can actually highlight the color in a photo, pick it out, and it'll do a pretty dang good job of simulating that color through the light itself. As you can see, they're RGB lights, meaning they can do, I guess you would call the full spectrum of light color. And they also have different modes, like for standard blue, warm lighting, and so on, and even some special effects modes. But I've mostly, almost entirely stuck to the RGB lighting just because it's nice to be able to do that without gels.
You're a really good light stand.
Oh, that looks good.
Yeah, you're not yelling at her and she's not crying. This is great.
So even though I had a tripod, I realized I didn't have a release cable for the Nikon F6, and I really didn't feel like doing the whole 2-second self-timer thing. So I just kind of let it blur when it blurred, because as much as these lights are actually pretty good and bright, it's 100 speed film, and, well, you know, it winds up being slow often. You'll see later when I shoot with a roll of 400 film that it got a little easier, a little less blurry, but honestly, I don't mind. Slow film and a tripod is a fine combination, especially if you do happen to have a shutter release cable, but even then, a little blur can be kind of good, and it's really something I wish I could do in a way I like more often. But anyway, overall, I would say the light color changing was a little weird, but it mostly worked pretty fine. Although if you have somebody with epilepsy problems or something, you might want to be a little careful, as you saw some flashing there. But overall, it was very useful. These were very easy to work with, and they actually worked very well through the phone app. And you'll see here in just a second, one of the reasons I chose the gray background is because it has a tendency to keep the color saturation versus a white background, for example. So we tried lighting shadows and highlights in different colors here. I did the kind of horror under lighting for the greenish shadow and then the warmer color on the higher shadows. And a lot of this was just both of us, Madeline and myself, holding the lights in different directions and me experimenting and being able to see what's going on in live time, because these are continuous lights, which is definitely a major plus and partially worth the somewhat inconvenience of the lower output versus a flash. And also, as you can see, the Aerocolor looks great with this type of lighting. The colors are deeply saturated. However, I do have to note that it was actually Negative Lab Pro that had a bit of an issue with this. Not because of the clear base, I guess because of the heavily saturated colors. Negative Lab Pro, I guess, kind of averages things out according to the scene. And when there's like an extreme shift to like purple or you know, green, red or whatever, it assumes maybe it's something like expired film, that it tries to make it look like it's not expired, which is great when you're shooting expired film, but a little tricky when you're shooting with just really almost monochromatic lighting or like bicolor lighting essentially. But I was able to balance it back out in Negative Lab Pro, and I think what I did was mostly messing with the green channel actually on the white balance thing. But also you might try scanning it in a way like as a no adjustments type thing. So I'm gonna keep working on that, and maybe I'll email the Negative Lab Pro guy about it, which I probably should have done before this, but hey, I've been really busy, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, like super busy with big stuff that I'm super excited about, and we'll be sharing soon, I promise. Speaking of sharing, I do have a roll of Cinestill 400D I shot on a Hasselblad. But first, we're going to look at the last of the Luminar Aerocolor photos, which I think turned out well as well. This one you see a little more washed out like the Negative Lab Pro interpretation tends to be, but you see the color holds pretty well even in the highlights and shadows, and I'm just very pleased with it, and I will probably shoot in the studio more with this type of film. And before we get to the Hasselblad results, I also have to thank my patrons listed here. For as little as $1 a month, you can join these awesome people in supporting this channel and my ventures. I share the photos from the episode in higher resolution, give news updates, and you'll be the first to hear about my secret project updates too. There's a link in the description, or just go to Jamie Photo on Patreon. I appreciate it. It helps so much. And now let's look at the Hasselblad photos I shot with. Actually, I don't remember. I think it might have been Cinestill 400D, but it could have possibly been Fuji 400. But anyway, the color is so different, it's really hard to tell. And I'm using soft focus, which also softens halations, which makes that not easy to tell. But this saturated super beautifully, and it turned out really well, I think. And I'm sure being able to shoot 400 ISO and getting those 2 extra stops of light helped a lot. I think messing around with slower film in general is good. And also I did some double exposures on the Hasselblad for maybe the first time ever. Only a couple turned out, but I'm okay with them. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to click like, subscribe, turn on notifications. I'll see you soon with some big news actually. Thanks, bye.